Life Lessons with Uramichi Oniisan is one of those animes that kind of flew under the radar for me. It wasn't until my friend recommended it to me that I decided to give it a watch, and boy am I glad I watched it. This show is definitely for a more mature audience, and when I say that, I don't mean 18 plus inappropriate stuff, I mean those of you who are currently dealing with or have experienced the thrills of life in general. And yes, I'm being sarcastic. Because we're all aware what life decides to throw at you, and this anime perfectly captures that with its dark sense of humour, often having the main character go into a pretty dark place, explaining to, and here's the funny part, kids, some, well, interesting and brutally honest experiences of life. Now that you've got the idea, let's get into the full review. Now keep in mind this is spoiler free, as the title says, but don't worry as this series doesn't really have that much of a plot that I'd say could spoil stuff. Now on this review series, I rate the following categories out of 10, and those are art/animation, characters, music, story/plot, and finally I present an overall/average score. So without further delay, let's start with the story/plot. Uramichi Oniisan is based around a segment-style episode structure, meaning instead of having one long full episode, you still get a full episode, but there are segments lasting from 5 to 10 minutes, each containing some levels of interesting antics that the characters are involved in. So as for a story/plot, where they do seem to flow into each other, they often seem to pick up where the last one left off, or maybe if you're using the anime's world, 10 to 15 minutes later. This is perfectly fine, as you can imagine each episode as containing short comedy skits, and this is where we get into what these contain. Most of the segments contain either the characters being featured on the set of a show called Together with Marman, or out and about in the real world, whether that being in their own apartment or out in a bar, etc. And yes, you heard that right. This is what makes them so relatable. The characters are actually workers on this show, live in their own apartments, and are aged between 27 to 32. I'm just setting a range here. Now where you might not be able to fully see yourself in the character, no matter if you're 16, 18, 22, 25, 30, whatever, you'll definitely find something in these characters you can relate to. I for one relate to some of the things in the main character. I won't say how, as this isn't about me. It's still interesting though. Since this is spoiler free, I won't talk too much more about the story/plot, but just know that if you enjoy dark humour, you'll definitely get a laugh out of this, or if not, you'll probably find yourself almost feeling personally attacked, and not in a horrible way, more just finding yourself going, oh, yeah, So for story/plot, I don't know if I can actually call it that, because again, there isn't a story/plot here. More just a following these characters around on their days through life. So for this episode, I'll change this category to episodes and rate it a 10 out of 10. Because really, I don't think I've ever found myself nodding so much during an episode because I think, yep, that's very true. Or if not that, I'm laughing way too much. Probably to hide the fact that these statements about life are too accurate and I realise that my life isn't going anywhere and the laughing is just to protect myself from going into a deep depression. Anyway, let's move on to characters. Uramichi, the main character, is 31 and a former gymnast. And yes, this is what makes the character relatable for a lot of people. Because where he's the exercise character on Together with Marman, you're probably wondering why he's not a world famous gymnast, and how he's on this show. Think about it for a moment. Now you get why he's relatable. How many people have gone to university or college, gotten a degree, and ended up in a line of work they probably don't want to actually be doing? I think you get the point now. Of course, don't actually look too deeply into these things, otherwise you could actually get depressed watching this. Uramichi is very quiet in nature, and as you can imagine, when he's on the show, he snaps into a very happy and cheerful personality, but ends up randomly reminding himself about the thrills of life and says these random things in front of the kids, which is already hilarious in itself. Iketeru is the next character I'll talk about. He's 27 and works alongside Uramichi as the singing star, and as you can probably see by this part here, he's the handsome character. One of his personality traits is that he often finds a dirty joke in a lot of things, If you mention something looks long and round, he'd probably be laughing his head off. In addition, he can be quite absent-minded at times, often when people are talking to him for an extended period of time. But he's still a great character. Tadano is a 32-year-old female singing star that works next to Iketeru, and is the only female cast member on the main show at least. Of course, there are female characters, just not as stars. Tadano is a very cheerful character, however, as with the other characters, she has issues with some aspects of life, particularly when it comes to wanting to get married. Usahara, a 28-year-old who acts in a bunny suit on the show, is probably my personal favourite character. Not only is he a complete dork, but he's the only one who tries to get close to Uramichi and often makes jokes or comments about him. But you don't want to do that because it doesn't usually end well for Usahara. If you want to look at it in a different way though, he's probably just trying to be a good friend to Uramichi. Usahara is also one of those characters who's after getting a girlfriend, and when he gets drunk, he just doesn't stop mentioning it, which is personally why I love him as a character. I always enjoy the dorky, kind of idiotic characters with a silly nature. That can sometimes be pretty adorable. And by the way, I mean idiotic in the nicest way possible. Also, in this series, I make a joke with a sim counter, and I'm not gonna lie. What? I mean, he's mostly in a suit, so... Sorry, what was I saying? Anyway, moving on to Mitsuo, who is also 28 and... Dang it! Anyway, Mitsuo is good friends with Uramichi and Usahara. He's a calm and quiet character, but very level-headed. He wears a bear suit on the show and performs alongside Usahara. As for all of these characters in general, all of them have something to make you laugh and something you can probably relate to. Now, of course, there are other characters I could mention, but that would get into spoiler territory, so I'll just say for the score, characters get a 10 out of 10, as each of them have been written really well and have very unique personalities. Art/animation. The show is animated by a company called Studio Blanc, which was only founded in 2008, and only has 6 credits, including this show, which is fine, but they don't seem a very well-known company. However, the animation is perfectly adequate, and I don't have any issues with it. All characters looked amazing, there wasn't any strange scenes, and in some instances, they looked really well done. So, honestly, again, this will get another 10 out of 10. Music. As for the final category, music, I don't know if there's much to say here. The only comments are that the opening and ending are great songs. ABC is good sounding in itself with a very fun opening animation, and as for the ending song, it's called Dream On, which is also a very nice sounding ending. I obviously can't show that for copyright reasons, but it's very good regardless. With this review series, I always like to review music as the actual soundtrack, but that didn't seem very prominent, so I'll leave out scoring music. But just know the opening and ending are very well done, so as for them, they get a 10 out of 10. But that won't be counted in the average, which, speaking of, overall/average. Given that every category got this, I think it's pretty clear what this show will get for the overall/average, and that's a 10 out of 10. Conclusion. Life Lessons with Uramichi Oniisan is one of those gems of an anime that I don't think got as much attention as it should have. I mean, as I mentioned, I didn't really see anything about it right away, and I'm really glad I did watch it. Now, does it deserve a 10 out of 10? Well, yes, simply because the writing is genius. If you've had many life experiences, a good portion of what the characters say in this anime are very relatable, and you really can relate to one or many of the characters in this show, and that's what gives it the high score. It's the fact that most of the animes you watch are amazing, but this one gives you something to relate to, and the characters themselves are really entertaining to a point where each episode gave you something to laugh at, and I think that's what gave this anime a 10 out of 10. As for me personally, where at times I definitely felt like I was looking into a mirror and telling myself these things, I thoroughly found each episode entertaining and engaging in some way that you almost felt a part of the cast. And again, as for the cast themselves, I thought each character was designed, written and even voiced really well. and if they made more episodes, I would definitely make sure to watch them. Thanks for watching. Please leave your feedback down below as there's always room for improvement, and if you've seen this anime, share your thoughts down below as I'd love to hear them. But if you're going to include any spoilers, please write it further down into the comment. Before you subscribe, please feel free to check out the rest of my channel first as I don't just make this type of video. Thank you once again, and I hope to speak to you in my next video. Goodbye for now.